Has the Sinaloa drug cartel of Mexico replaced Whitey Bulger as the U.S. federal government's most favored gang? Beginning in the 1960s, the FBI was desperate to break the grip of the Italian-American mafia on organized crime in the country, and courted intelligence sources that could help inform on and bring to justice the kingpins of La Cosa Nostra. In Boston, the FBI put an ambitious mid-level gangster named James Whitey Bulger on the payroll after he proved willing to rat out his superiors in the Irish Winter Hill Gang and then his Italian-American rivals. The FBI strategy succeeded, sort of. By 1990, nearly all of the mafia's top leadership were serving long federal prison sentences, and Bulger had become a top source for FBI officials. His FBI handlers had won national accolades inside the Bureau and built their careers on Bulger's information. Bulger was funded and protected by the FBI, and eventually he had police and key FBI agents in the Boston office on his payroll, as Bulger and his minions waged a reign of terror on the Boston area populace that included at least 20 murders. One example of how the FBI had become the enforcement arm of Bulger's Winter Hill Gang is that Boston office FBI agent H. Paul Rico became one of Bulger's assassins. When Bulger was finally indicted for murder in January 1995, Bulger's handler, John Connolly, alerted Whitey to the pending indictment, enabling his 16-year evasion from the law. Both Connolly and Rico ended up with murder convictions, and other FBI agents admitted to being on Bulger's payroll. Christmases for kids and cops, Bulger reputedly told his associate Kevin Weeks. Today, the federal ATF and DEA and even CIA seem to be following the same Whitey Bulger pattern with the Sinaloa drug cartel in north-central Mexico. The ATF recently armed the Sinaloa cartel for war, according to a U.S. Senate report, with the transfer of more than 2,000 guns in its Operation Fast and Furious. These guns included AR-15s, AK-47s, and several models of 50-caliber armor-piercing sniper weapons with a killing range of more than 1 mile. In at least one incident, the 50-caliber rifles were used to shoot at and force the landing of a Mexican federal police helicopter. The arms transfers to the Sinaloa drug cartel coincided with a rise in violence in Mexico, particularly in the region controlled by the Sinaloa cartel. The U.S. Senate report concluded of Operation Fast and Furious, quote, "It ended only after U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was murdered in December 2010 with weapons linked to this investigation. Only then did ATF officials in Mexico discover the true nature of Operation Fast and Furious." As ATF acting attaché in Mexico, Carlos Canino testified on the efforts of the Phoenix ATF office to sell arms to the Sinaloa cartel, quote, "Brian Terry is not the last guy, unfortunately. Unfortunately, there are hundreds of Brian Terrys probably in Mexico. We, ATF, armed the Sinaloa cartel. It is disgusting," closed quote. The cost in Mexican lives was much greater, at least in the thousands of deaths. There were political assassinations, such as the brother of the Chihuahua State Attorney General. Fast and Furious guns, in that case, were traced to the hands of responsible Sinaloa drug cartel members. In another recent case, the entire police department of Ascension, a Ciudad Juarez suburb, resigned August 4th. All 20 surviving policemen resigned after a cartel attack that left 3 other police officers dead earlier in the week, and also after a May 2011 assassination of the police chief. Late last year, the Mexican government captured Sinaloa underboss Vicente Zambada Niebla. And on July 29th of this year, after his transfer to U.S. custody, his lawyer alleged that Zambada had been an informant of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency since at least 2004, and that he should be immune to prosecution for drug trafficking because of the terms of his informant agreement. The filing by his lawyer said, quote, "Sometime prior to 2004 and continuing through the time period covered in the indictment, the United States government entered into an agreement with the cartel leadership. Under that agreement, the Sinaloa cartel was to provide information accumulated by the leaders against rival Mexican drug trafficking organization to the United States government. In return, the United States government agreed to dismiss prosecution of the pending case against Loya, not to interfere with his drug trafficking activities, and those of the Sinaloa cartel, not to actively prosecute him, Chapo, Mayo, and the other leadership of the Sinaloa cartel, and not to apprehend them. So was Zambada a DEA informant? The United States government has not said explicitly yes or no, but the DEA has acknowledged a role in Fast and Furious. The Los Angeles Times reported August 5th that, quote, Michael M. Lionheart, the DEA administrator, said DEA agents primarily helped gather evidence in cases in Phoenix and El Paso, and in the program's single indictment last January that netted just 20 defendants for illegal gun trafficking, close quote. Moreover, the CIA is also involved. The Washington Times reported on August 11th that, quote, according to a CIA insider, the agency had a strong hand in creating, orchestrating, and exploiting Operation Fast and Furious. The CIA's motive is clear enough. The U.S. government is afraid the Los Zetas drug cartel will mount a successful coup d'etat against the government of Felipe Calderon, close quote. But this may not be simply a case of U.S. government stupidity. It may be a case of the United States government officials being on the payroll of the gang rather than the other way around. In other words, it may just be like the Whitey Bulger case. What we do know is that the Sinaloa cartel is the most likely of all cartels to pay off government officials. National Public Radio did a study of Mexican government prosecutions last year and concluded that, quote, NPR's analysis found 400 public officials, from local cops to army officers, who had been arrested for working for the drug mafias in the past 3.5 years. The pattern is clear. All the cartels infiltrate local and state agencies, but the Sinaloans and their former ally, the Beltran Leyva organization, were more likely to pay off military and senior federal officials compared with other cartels, according to the arrest data, close quote. What is clear from the Senate report on Fast and Furious is that senior members of the Obama administration were intimately aware of what was going on in the Phoenix office of the ATF and other law enforcement agencies. In Tom Clancy's novel Clear and Present Danger, there's a scene where the president's national security advisor, James Cutter, has a meeting with a Colombian drug gang leader, Felix Cortez. Cortez makes an offer to Cutter. Help him eliminate his rivals, and he'll promise dramatic arrests and reductions in drug supplies. He says, quote, was this not the objective of your operations in Colombia? To sting the cartel and reduce drug trafficking? I offer you success, the sort of success to which your president can point. Reduction in exports, some dramatic seizures and arrests, an intramural war within the cartel for which you will not be blamed, yet for which you will also take credit. I give you victory. Intersecting the Washington Times news story with the Senate report and the legal filing by Zambada's lawyer, a deal similar to Clancy's novel by the Obama White House seems plausible, if unproven at this point. But it definitely warrants a thorough investigation by Congress.